Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm Sam Albanese from the National Weather Service, and today's weather around the state to start with. We do have some wind chill warnings for the northwest Arctic coast as well as the north slopes of the Brooks Range. That's into these evening hours. We also have a high wind warning in the Kobuk-Noatak area, and that's for about 60 to 65 mile an hour winds, and that's until about midnight tonight. A high wind warning is also in effect for the southern inner channels of southeast Alaska for winds gusting to around 60 miles an hour until about midnight as well. We also have some advisories for blowing snow across much of the central interior on up to the upper Yukon Valley and the eastern slopes of the Brooks Range until tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon, as well as a freezing rain advisory in effect tonight for the Bristol Bay area. So what's going on that's causing all these winter-like problems across the state? Well, to start, we'll take a look at our satellite imagery. And as you can see with the Bering Sea, basically we have this north-northwesterly flow. Main area of low pressure at the surface and aloft is down in the Gulf of Alaska, and that's resulting in this strong northerly flow, northerly winds up in the northwest Arctic coastal areas and the western interior, which are triggering those, along with cold temperatures resulting in wind chills to about 70 below up there. Taking a look at the loop one more time, another thing to note is how these low pressure systems are basically staying south of the Aleutian Islands in this somewhat zonal flow across the North Pacific into the Gulf of Alaska. And now as we take a look at our satellite imagery over the state itself and the Gulf of Alaska, here's where you can see the ramifications of that main upper level low pressure system over the Gulf area with the zonal flow and that energy coming in from the Bering Sea. Basically, you can see this circulation in the Gulf of Alaska, weak low pressure near Kodiak Island, stronger low pressure by Haida Gwaii in southeast Alaska. And as we put this loop in motion again, you can see this low pressure system, it moved on through today, but there's another one that's coming up from the south, and that's going to produce those stronger winds yet again tonight and even into tomorrow. Some pretty strong winds in the southern panhandle as these systems go through. Taking a look now at our surface map today. Strong low pressure off of Haida Gwaii moving into southeast Alaska. Rain was falling throughout the majority of southeast Alaska today, a mixture of rain and snow as you got on up towards the northern panhandle, particularly up towards the border. Rain scattered throughout the North Gulf Coast, rain across Kodiak Island, a mixture of rain and snow along the Chugach Mountains, along the coastal regions of the state down to the Aleutian Mountains. And then with this trough extending on up towards the Bering Strait, some snow showers were occurring in that trough along with the strong winds. Scattered snow showers over the central to western interior and some snow basically in that eastern Tanana Valley area. Out into the Bering Sea behind this low pressure system, this trough extends on out into the northwest Bering Sea, and along that trough a mixture of rain and snow showers through that central to western Bering Sea, with snow showers out in the extreme western Bering Sea. By tonight, we expect this next low pressure system to be coming on up into the picture. That's going to make the winds jump up yet again, expecting those high wind warnings in the southern inner channels of southeast Alaska. Rain with this system as it comes in, strong winds. Rain will spread throughout much or continue throughout much of the panhandle. A mixture of rain and snow in the northern panhandle. Along the North Gulf Coast here, some scattered areas of rain and snow in Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula. Rain and snow even into the northern Cook Inlet region in the Anchorage to Palmer-Wasilla area, with snow expected to develop up into the Susitna Valley. Same thing in the Copper River Basin, areas of snow. Not expecting a lot of snowfall, but expect areas of snow throughout the Copper River Basin. Some snow showers in the eastern interior to the upper Yukon Valley. Also some snow showers basically in the the upper Kuskokwim Valley right on up into the Koyukuk and Kobuk region. Rain and snow can be expected in the Bristol Bay area, as well as freezing rain tonight. Rain showers along the Alaska Peninsula, some scattered snow showers in the Pribilof Islands, rain showers out into the eastern Aleutians with a mixture of rain and snow showers out to the western Aleutians is what you can expect for tonight. Now, further north north of the Brooks Range, clear cold conditions, windy conditions over northwestern Alaska. This is the area where low wind chills can be expected to 70 below, as well as strong winds about 60 to 65 miles an hour. Blowing snow conditions over the eastern Brooks Range down into the central interior here for tonight. Taking a look now at the forecast for tomorrow. Strong low pressure once again into southern southeast Alaska. Windy conditions in the southern panhandle, rainy conditions. Chance of rain as you move a little bit further north. Chance of rain along that North Gulf Coast, although cloudy conditions are going to persist there. Rain and snow showers mixed over the Cook Inlet region and the Kenai Peninsula. Snow across the Copper River Basin into the Susitna Valley will be tapering off into the afternoon. Snow showers on the north side of the Alaska Range and the Tanana Valley into the central interior, right on down into the lower Yukon Valley and the Kuskokwim Valley. Expect snow showers there. Snow showers and mixture of rain and snow showers in that Bristol Bay area. Expect snow showers across the St. Lawrence Island region. Clear, cold, windy conditions are going to persist over northwestern Alaska, even though not likely to see the wind chill warning conditions to persist to 70 below. You're still going to have some pretty cold wind chills up in that region of the state, dangerously cold conditions there. Snow showers scattered throughout the Bering Sea, rain showers across the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and scattered into the central Aleutian Islands. Taking a look at the forecast for Thursday, weak low pressure along the outer coast of southeast Alaska will result in rain, likely in the Sitka area, chance of rain throughout the remainder of southeast Alaska. Cloudy conditions along the North Gulf Coast into the south central region as we still have weak low pressure across that region. Sunny conditions can be expected into the Copper River Basin and the Susitna Valley, with cloudy conditions over much of the eastern interior right on down into southwestern Alaska. Chance of snow basically from the eastern Brooks Range through the central interior down to the Yukon Delta and portions of the Bristol Bay area, with some snow showers likely from Bristol Bay up into the Kuskokwim Delta region. A mixture of rain and snow showers can be expected across the Alaska Peninsula. Some snow showers are possible near the Pribilof Islands, and also expect a mixture of rain and snow showers over the extreme western Aleutian Islands. Temperatures around the state today in southeast Alaska, generally in the 40s, although the northern panhandle up into the Haines, Skagway area, temperatures in the mid-30s there. 40s along the North Gulf Coast to the 30s over the south central region, in the teens in the Copper River Basin on up into the eastern interior in the Tanana Valley, as well as single digits across the upper Kuskokwim Valley into the central interior. Moving on up towards the Arctic coast, temperatures remain below zero throughout the Arctic coast, as well as the north slopes of the Brooks Range. As we crossed on down into the northwest Arctic region of the state in that Kotzebue Sound area, temperatures right in the right around 10 to 15 or so, 24 in Nome, in the teens across the Yukon Delta into the Kuskokwim Delta, and then as we move over towards southwestern Alaska and Bristol Bay, temperatures in the 20s and 30s there, 30s along the Alaska Peninsula to the low 40s, temperatures in the low 40s across Kodiak Island, low 40s over the Dutch Harbor area, low to mid 30s in the Pribilof Islands, and temperatures in the low 40s over the central Aleutian Islands to mid 30s as we get on out towards Shemya. For our low temperature forecast for tonight, expect your temperatures in southeast Alaska to stay above freezing pretty much throughout the panhandle. Mid 30s to low 40s to mid 40s is what you're going to be seeing there. Temperatures along the North Gulf Coast region pretty much staying right around the freezing mark, within a few degrees one way or another of that 32-degree mark. In the Copper River Basin, expect your temperatures to drop down into the single digits. Below zero readings can be expected into the Tanana Valley. Temperatures in the minus teens in that eastern interior, almost at 30 below as we get on over to the central Brooks Range, staying in the minus teens and minus 20s along the Arctic coast, single digits to about 2 below by Kotzebue, right around 10 to 15 over southwestern, well, the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta to the 30s over southwestern Alaska and Bristol Bay. Same thing for the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures in the mid to upper 30s there, mid 30s across the Pribilof Islands, and temperatures out across the Aleutian Islands in the mid 30s to right around 34 as we get out to Shemya. For our highs tomorrow, in the 40s throughout southeast Alaska, upper 30s to low 40s along the North Gulf Coast, mid 30s as you move a little bit further inland. In the teens again in the Copper River Basin, single digits over the eastern interior to the negative teens over the Arctic, the Brooks Range, about 26 below for a high tomorrow over near Circle. Temperatures staying on the cool side along the Arctic coast, around 10 below for the most part over the eastern Arctic coast to 5 below as you move to the west. Temperatures over the Bering Strait region in the single digits on the Kotzebue Sound side to the teens on the Norton Sound side, teens to low 20s in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta to the 30s in Bristol Bay, 40s across the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the eastern Aleutians to central Aleutians, and in the upper 30s across the Pribilof Islands. Taking a look now at our flying weather for tomorrow. Marginal conditions in southern southeast Alaska, marginal conditions throughout much of the eastern interior right on down to the south central region in Kodiak Island with some IFR conditions along the Alaska Range, some IFR conditions along the Killbuck Mountains as well as from the Nunivak Island region up to the St. Lawrence Island area with marginal conditions prevalent throughout the central to eastern Bering Sea including the Pribilof Islands as well as some marginal conditions over the central Aleutian Islands. For our passes for tomorrow, expect VFR conditions for Anaktuvik Pass as well as Adian Pass. Moving on down to the Alaska Range, expect IFR conditions for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, IFR conditions for Rainy Pass, marginal to IFR conditions for Windy Pass, IFR conditions for Isabel Pass as well as Mentasta Pass. Expect marginal conditions for Tonita Pass with marginal to IFR conditions in Portage Pass. And down in southeast Alaska, expect VFR conditions for both Chilkoot and White Pass. For our freezing levels, pretty much at the surface throughout the majority of the state to about 4,000 feet over southeast Alaska to 2,000 feet over Kodiak Island to the Alaska Peninsula to about 1,000 feet as we move on out across much of the Aleutian Islands. For our icing for tomorrow, expect some isolated moderate rime icing from your freezing level to 14,000 feet in the southern panhandle. Some isolated moderate rime icing can also be expected over the south central region to Kodiak Island as well as across the Killbuck Mountains from your freezing level to about 10,000 feet. Taking a look at our jet stream for tomorrow. Jet stream is at about 95 knots coming off the southern Kamchatka Peninsula. Accelerates to 115 knots as it crosses south of the Aleutian Islands to 125 knots south of the Gulf of Alaska and then 130 knot jet moving on up into the North America, the Northwest Territories of Canada. Taking a look now at our 9,000 foot level. Not a lot of wind can be expected in the northern panhandle, about 30 to 40 knots in the southern panhandle. Light winds over the majority of the mainland, right on up to the Brooks Range until we get to northwestern Alaska. 25 to 30 knot winds can be expected there. Eastern Bering Sea, light winds until we get to the eastern Aleutians, about 30 to 40 knot winds, 10 to 20 knot winds across the Aleutian Islands. Down to the 3,000 foot level, we can see this strong low pressure system coming on up towards southeast Alaska, 50 to 70 knot winds over that southern panhandle region. Much lighter as we get on up to the northern panhandle, down to about 15 knots there. Light and variable winds over the south central portion of the state as well as southwestern Alaska. As we move on up towards the Brooks Range, you'll see your winds increasing to about 20 knots along the Brooks Range to 25 knots along the Arctic coast, 20 to 25 knots coming down through the Bering Strait with 20 to 25 knots winds across the eastern Bering Sea to 30 knots as we cross the Alaska Peninsula, and about 10 to 20 knot winds across the western to central Aleutian Islands. And for our turbulence for tomorrow, occasional severe turbulence below 2,500 feet is what you should expect in southern southeast Alaska with all the rough terrain and the strong winds. It's going to be a very, very turbulent day down there. Also expect some isolated moderate turbulence over the western Alaska Peninsula as well over to the central Aleutian Islands. Some isolated moderate turbulence across the St. Lawrence Island region, the Kotzebue Sound area, the Seward Peninsula, as well as the northwest Arctic coast. And that about wraps up this portion of the show. Enjoy the segment and come back for the marine forecast.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Cherry.
And I'm Forrest Kirst, a commercial pilot.
And today we're going to talk about an experiment we're doing using a small aircraft where we've mounted a sensor package to the aircraft to measure temperature, humidity, and pressure, as well as elevation and longitude and latitude of the airplane. And with the package, we're going to sample the local winter inversion here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And an inversion is where you have the surface atmosphere that's closest to the land is colder than the atmosphere above it, which is the opposite of normal conditions throughout the year throughout North America. Forrest, maybe you could tell us more about how a pilot experiences an inversion during the wintertime.
On the ground during our pre-flight, it's very cold out. This morning it's minus 28 centigrade, which is about minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So doing our pre-flight, it's extremely cold, hard on the airplane, hard on the people. For flying at the colder temperatures for doing these experiments, we're somewhere between minus 20 and minus 40 degrees. So we have to dress for that temperature inside the airplane as well as when we're outside of the airplane. When we're doing our pre-flight, we have to be extremely careful not to damage the plastic parts on the outside of the airplane. Extremely careful not to touch the metal parts with our fingers because we'll get contact frostbite. And we have to be real careful just with everything because it's just so cold. We have to dress as if we're going to be outdoors the whole time, and we use the aircraft heater to make it comfortable in our clothes and so we can see out the window. When we get the airplane running and we do our takeoff roll, we have increased engine performance and increased lift because of the colder, denser air. So we get off the ground earlier and have a better climb rate. When we reach the inversion layer, quite often the windows will fog up. The airplane's performance will decrease slightly because it's warmer air, produces less lift, and it produces less power from the engine.
When an inversion is present, air doesn't move anywhere, especially it doesn't want to move up. And so the classic look there is the steam out of the power plant or automobile exhaust, any kind of wood smoke or such, will come out of a chimney and then just flatten out and not move up. And if it moves horizontally at all, it's very slow, just creeping along. When you see that kind of lack of air movement, especially when there's clear skies, the sun is maybe low on the horizon, that is an inversion day in interior Alaska.
The reason it is so cool in the far north during winter is that the incoming radiation is at such a low angle. Now, as the atmosphere begins to cool in late fall, we start to get snowfall, which causes the land surface to be white, and light colors reflect incoming radiation right back, which causes additional cooling. And it's the reason we have a persistent inversion from late fall through early spring here in Fairbanks.
To get a radiation inversion to form, you need clear or mostly clear skies. You need no wind or very little wind down at the surface. And you need to have the sun under the horizon or high noon in December such that even if the sun is up, it's so low it doesn't really feed in any energy. When those three things happen, you lose heat to space from the surface of the Earth, but you're not getting any new heat in, and you get a very cold layer of air hugging the ground, cold, dense air that just lays down in the bottom of the valley. That's the classic radiation inversion setup.
So as we do our experiment with the aircraft, we're going to use a similar instrumentation package as is mounted on the standard weather balloons. We're going to measure temperature profiles, relative humidity, and pressure. And we're also going to tie the sensor package into a GPS unit, a global positioning system unit, so we know where the aircraft is located relative to the topography. So now I want to tell you about the instrument package that we're using on the aircraft. First of all, we use a NiCad 12-volt battery to power the data logger and the instruments. The data logger records the output from the meteorological sensors, which here include a temperature and relative humidity sensor and a pressure transmitter, which works like a barometer to measure atmospheric pressure. This particular one is going to plug into the static port in the aircraft, which also helps power some of the aircraft instruments. Finally, we have the Global Positioning System computer, which measures the latitude, longitude, and altitude of the aircraft. This one has an accuracy of about 10 meters, which is perfectly fine for what we're trying to do here. Here's a picture of our temperature and relative humidity sensor installed on the aircraft. So this is an FAA approved plate here mounted to the window. And we want the temperature sensor mounted towards the aft of the aircraft so we don't get air rushing in and it has a chance to equilibrate to the environmental conditions. And then finally, our pressure sensor is connected to this static port in the airplane, which again just measures the ambient pressure of the atmosphere where it hits this little hole in the plane. That's piped back into our pressure sensor inside. So one of the things that we're going to go out and do today is that we're going to attach the sensor package to the aircraft, and then Forrest is going to take off from Fairbanks International.
To get repeatability for the data, we flew in and out of Fairbanks International, Nenana Airport, Ladd Army Airfield, and Eielson Airfield. So we do a very slow climb up through the inversion layer, climbing at about 100 feet per minute. Just very slow climb to the top of the inversion, find out where the ceiling is, and then once we're at the ceiling of the inversion, we do very slow porpoising up and down through the inversion to see if it's stable, if it's got different characteristics throughout it. Then we get to the next airport and we do a very slow descent into the airport at about 100 feet per minute, all the way to the ground.
Welcome back, and now let's take a look at our marine forecast for southeast Alaska for tomorrow. And we're expecting is gale force winds in the southern inside waters, east to southeast winds about 35 knots. Expect east winds 40 knots in the southern outside waters to 25 knots as we move on up to off the coast of Sitka to 15 knots over the east Gulf Coast. North winds 25 to 30 knots from the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area down into the central inside waters. Taking a look at the area for Thursday, winds are going to drop off a bit, well, a little bit in southern southeast Alaska to 30 knots, 25 knot winds in the central inside waters with winds remaining out of the north at 30 knots up through Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. South winds 35 knots in the southern outside waters to east winds 30 knots just off the coast of Sitka with northeast winds 15 knots along that east Gulf Coast. Taking a look now at the south central region for Wednesday. Light and variable winds in Prince William Sound, northeast winds about 10 to 15 knots down Cook Inlet. West to northwest winds along the north Gulf Coast about 15 to 20 knots. Winds are going to be southeast about 15 to 20 knots through the Barren Island area early on in the day, becoming more light and variable. Expect your winds to be at the southeast about 15 knots through that Shelikof Strait area, and south to southwest winds south of Kodiak Island at about 15 knots. Taking a look at the forecast for Thursday. Light winds persisting in Prince William Sound. Light winds along the north Gulf Coast about 10 to 15 knots. Light and variable to north-northwest. Northwest winds across the Barren Islands at 15 knots. Variable to north winds down Cook Inlet at around 10 knots. And northwest winds across Kodiak Island at 15 knots. Taking a look at the Alaska Peninsula forecast for Wednesday. Expect light winds in Bristol Bay to the south of the eastern Alaska Peninsula, around 15 knots there. Northwesterly winds at 25 knots over the western Alaska Peninsula region. On Thursday, expect the winds to be northwest 20 knots over the western Alaska Peninsula regions with northwest winds 20 knots also in Bristol Bay to 25 knots south of the eastern Alaska Peninsula. Taking a look at the Aleutian Islands for Wednesday, expect northwest winds 30 knots over the eastern Aleutian Islands to the central Aleutian Islands to about 25 knots as we get on over towards Atka and Adak. Northwest winds 30 knots as we're over the Kiska area with west winds 20 knots as we get on out towards Shemya. Taking a look at the forecast for Thursday, winds are dropping off to 20 knots over the eastern Aleutian Islands to 15 knots on the north side of the eastern Aleutian Islands north of Nikolsky there. Northwest winds about 25 to 30 knots over the Atka to Adak region, 25 knot winds across the Amchitka area with winds out of the northwest at 20 knots as we get on out over the western Aleutian Islands near Shemya. Taking a look at the Bering Sea coastal waters for Wednesday, expect your winds to be out of the north 20 knots around Nunivak Island, northeast 30 knots up towards St. Lawrence Island, north winds 25 knots over the St. Matthew Island waters to 25 knot northwesterly winds in the Pribilof Islands. For Thursday, expect your winds to be north 15 knots in the Nunivak Island waters, northeast 30 knots persisting in the St. Lawrence Island region to north winds 20 knots over St. Matthew Island, and north winds 20 knots as we move on down towards the Pribilof Islands. For the Arctic coastal waters on Wednesday, expect your winds to be relatively strong outside of Kotzebue Sound, northeast winds 40 knots there, 45 knot winds out of the northeast over that near Cape Lisburne, 20 to 25 knots from Barrow down to Point Lay, northeast winds 20 knots over the Prudhoe Bay region with 20 knot easterly winds in the Kaktovik area. Taking a look at the forecast for Thursday, winds are going to be out of the north to northeast 20 knots from Kaktovik over to Prudhoe Bay, northeast winds 20 knots in the Barrow region, northeast winds 25 knots off of Wainwright to Point Lay with northeast winds 40 knots from Cape Lisburne right on down to outside of the Kotzebue Sound area. Now we'll take a quick look at the maps again for tonight. Quick recap. Wind chill warnings to 70 below over the northwest Arctic coast as well as the western Brooks Range. High wind warning in that Noatak area. That's also through tonight. We have blowing snow advisories from the eastern Brooks Range right on down into the central interior. That's what you can expect there. And a high wind warning for winds about 60 miles an hour in the southern inside waters of southeast Alaska. With this system coming up from the south, rain throughout southeast Alaska, some rain and snow mixed along the North Gulf Coast, rain over Kodiak Island, snow into the Susitna Valley as well as the Copper River Basin, some snow showers on up into the upper Yukon Valley, snow showers from the upper Kuskokwim Valley into the western interior, rain and snow mixed over the Bristol Bay area as well as some freezing rain is what you can expect there tonight. We're out of time for the show this evening. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.